You've probably heard that a podcast can build your brand, grow your audience, and convert leads into clients. But how do you actually make that happen? Well, that's exactly what we're talking about today. I'm speaking with my business coach, Kate Perkovic, about her podcast, The Ambitious Podcast. She breaks down exactly how she launched the Ambitious Podcast, which not only continues building trust with her audience, but is also bringing in high ticket sales. We're talking 150K in just 6 episodes. So if you want to hear exactly how she did this, keep listening. Welcome to the Podcast Cafe, where we're serving up everything you need to know about podcasting, from tips, stories, and strategies for podcasters from podcasters. I'm your host, Haley Hayhurst, the founder of Espresso Podcast Production, a full-service podcast agency helping business owners, creatives, and thought leaders launch and grow their shows. Whether you're just starting out or want to take your podcast to the next level, this is the place for you. Each week, we'll dive into practical tips, actionable strategies, and of course, stories from other podcasters so that you can build up a podcast that you love and that works for your business. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's get started. Welcome to the Podcast Cafe. Hey, Kate, welcome to the Podcast Cafe. I am so excited to be chatting with you today.
I'm honestly so excited to be here. I've seen these clips all over social media and I feel like I'm like watching it from afar, but now being in it is like so much even more exciting. So I'm very psyched to be here.
Well, I feel the same about your podcast. So we're going to talk all about Ambitious and the launch of it. And then also you are my business coach. So I learn from you all the time. I get to see your lovely face and learn from you so many times a week. And you have helped me grow my business so much. I just signed on for another 6 months with you.
I know, I'm very excited.
It's just very exciting. Yeah, so this is kind of a full circle moment to have you on the show.
Honestly, it's really exciting. I feel like I'm excited for today because even before we met, I was like, oh, I know things about podcasts. And then I met you and I was like, okay, whoa, like she knows things about podcasts. So I feel like I'm honestly just excited to hear all of your insights too, because I feel like for me, podcasting has been something that's kind of been like a trial and error thing. Mm-hmm. And I feel like indirectly, obviously, in kind of understanding the behind the curtain of your business, it's just been so incredible to see like the true intricacies of all the pieces that are involved to having like a really effective podcast.
Oh yeah, there is a lot that goes into having a great podcast, which we'll talk all about. But before we get into all of that, since we are in the Podcast Cafe, I have a very important question for you. What is your go-to coffee order?
Ooh, okay. So wait, well, I'm actually so excited to answer this. Okay, so I used to have vanilla lattes as like my jam. Mm-hmm. And then I went on a trip and they had something that was called like the pink drink. And I was like, what is that? So then it ended up being it's an oat milk latte, but with melted honey and cinnamon. So it's a cinnamon honey oat milk latte. It is so good. And since then, I have never had anything else. I am just like looking for it everywhere. So sometimes I travel with honey because some places don't have it. And then I just get a normal latte and add it. I love it so much. But it's so good. Iced or hot. It's delish.
I'm going to have to try that. I think that's the best answer I've gotten so far. I've gotten a lot of like lattes or Americanos, but I'm like, I need these creative drink orders. So yeah. I love that.
Yeah,
cool. Well, I'm definitely going to have to try that. Now I'd love to learn more about, who you are as a business owner, and really we'll get into the podcast after that.
Yeah. I mean, to do like the Coles notes of it, I mean, the big tagline that everybody typically sees is like server to 7-figure business owner, so on and so forth. I really wish it was that linear. It definitely wasn't. And so I feel like the sense of the stages in between. I've been in business for just over 6 years now. I started as a server who, like everybody else on social media, saw everyone having like laptop lifestyle. And I saw people were doing online business. I got super curious. And so I went to a event. And at that event, like many events, they give you an opportunity to join into a mastermind. And that was like my first investment into this world. I was not around entrepreneurs growing up. I don't know any entrepreneurs in my immediate family or friend circle, and really just kind of like sunk my teeth into it. And at the time I was working out a lot. And so I was okay, like maybe I'll try the fitness coaching type of category. And I am a big fan of like brownies and wine. And so that industry was not necessarily my natural calling. I've realized I'm not the chicken and broccoli girl. And so because of that, I was like, okay, like I really feel like I'm good at the business part and I love that, but I didn't love talking about fitness and health all the time. And so I actually ended up pivoting then after having a small time where I was a high ticket phone closer in another business. I kind of used that to get my feet wet, try to see like the different things that were out there in the business space. And I was a high ticket phone closer and a co-coach inside of someone else's program. And I just loved the discussion around business. And so, yeah, basically 5 years ago, I decided that I was going to like lean all in on doing business coaching underneath my own brand. And since then, it's been really amazing. Like we support now all scaling women to scale their companies. We have an amazing team of women that help us to do so. And, you know, there was kind of some like investigation when you're building businesses. We always talk about like, you know, have a mission and have a purpose and have like a big thing that you're looking to go toward. And I didn't really have that initially. Like, I feel like if I'm going to be really honest, my mission when I started was like make money and survive. Like it wasn't really like this like big overarching like philosophical thing. But then as we started to make money, I was like, okay, like I do need to have that. And then when I was doing research, I fell upon someone's site. It was talking about business stats and all these things that I nerd out on. Yeah, I do it in my weird time. It's on my own time. It's really weird. But I look into these stats. I find them really interesting to understand entrepreneurship. And one of them was saying that less than 3% of female-founded businesses ever hit 7 figures a year in revenue. And so I literally remember just sitting there and staring at the stat. And I was like, I genuinely don't understand. This can't be real. So then I kept investigating it and it was. And so then basically overnight that became the mission of our business. And so since then, everything we've done of, you know, programs or events or coaching or podcast has really all been, you know, with that in mind. And so that kind of brings us to today.
I love that evolution of your business. And yeah, I mean, that's what stood out to me about you online. I kept seeing you on my feed, and then I kept hearing about you, and people in ITI were talking about how you were helping them scale their businesses. And so you're like the queen of social proof. You're really good at showing up online. And really, after you started the Ambitious podcast, I feel like you've like 10x'd your content, right? You created your own Instagram account for Ambitious and have so many great clips from your solo episodes, your guests, and I think that's what a lot of business owners want these days. So can you tell us about the origin story of your podcast?
I feel like I'm just like I actually have no one to talk to other than you about this. You and I nerd out on this because you love podcasts as much as I do. But I feel like if someone, which is why I was so excited about today, I feel like if somebody doesn't understand the impact of a podcast, it's not until you start to be around people like yourself that you start to see the domino of what it can do for business and also just for brand and for mission and all the things. And so, yeah, I had a place actually where I was at with social media. I'd been posting on Instagram and stuff for a while. I had done the whole like TikTok thing. I wasn't really super excited about like doing the short clips of like 30 and 60 seconds. It was not my style. And I'm very long-winded naturally. So like I need usually like more than 30 seconds to get my point out. And so I found the short form content very difficult because it meant that I wasn't really like in flow. I had to like kind of make my thoughts in snippets. And so because of that, I was like, there has to be another way that I can make this content. So I actually did consider for a second doing YouTube in the sense of like YouTube trainings. But then I thought about, you know, there's a lot of editing and camera shots and all of these things. And like, I kind of just want to be able to like press record and go. And so I was like, well, what about a podcast? And so I had that idea actually, which I hate to say this out loud, but I had it 3 years sitting in my brain. I had 3 years of idea that I should do a podcast. I should do a podcast. And everyone's like, yeah, you would be so great at it. And if I'm going to be honest, the thing that actually stopped me from starting the podcast was my freaking set, if you can believe it, which was now a series. Yeah. It's a series of Amazon lights. Like it really was one cart purchase and I was set up to go. And I assure you have clients that feel this way all the time. The thought process of like, I just in my brain wanted it to be so professional. Like I was like, I want it to look really curated. I want it to look like a studio, blah, blah, blah. And like, by the way, guys, like as we film this, I'm in my basement. So like, it's not like it's like bougie by any means. I'm like in my dark, unfinished basement with a bunch of lights around me. But I think, you know, the thing that I am frustrated with actually with myself when I started it was that I didn't start it earlier, because now seeing the amount of people that it's impacted and the messages that we get from the episodes and all the pieces, I could have had 3 more years of doing that, and I didn't do it because of a camera, a light, and a curtain that's currently behind me. Like, it's really just crazy when I think about it. So what got me to finally move actually on doing it and like, take it out of idea bucket and start executing it was the fact that I didn't want to have to do more and more and more filming of social content. Like, I was like, okay, I need to get more visibility for my business and my brand. I don't want to do paid advertising. And I know social, and when people see me teach and talk, really does ultimately give them an insight on what's going to be to work with me or my knowledge. So how do I translate that to social? And I need a lot of clips. And so it actually sparked kind of in the searching for visibility because I had seen other creators who were chopping up their podcasts. And so I thought, okay, well, how many clips can I get out of this? Like, how many pieces of content? And so when I started to make an episode, we actually were getting like anywhere between 10 to 13 clips because mine are usually an hour to 90 minutes, the episodes. So when we would chop them up, when we started to outline the strategy of it, I was like, whoa, this would be like groundbreaking when it comes to content because that was 13 or 10 clips, let's just say, on Instagram. But then we're like, what if we did it on Instagram and TikTok? Now we've got 20. And then and Facebook, now we got 30 clips going out. And then and YouTube Shorts. Now we have 40 clips going out a week. So I thought if I had 40 new seeds planted in the world every week, but it only took me 1 hour of the recording of the podcast to do that, like, yeah, it kind of seems like a no-brainer. And so for me, to be honest, the initial hurdle to getting it up and launched was just getting the freaking filming done and getting the cameras and all of that because I am not a tech person by any means. But the real motivator behind it was the fact that also with social, there was just this lacking of depth. Like, I feel like when you're watching on social, you're getting like little appetizers of somebody, like either their personality or their knowledge. And one of the things with the podcast that's been so interesting is the ability to really go deep with people. And people are like, I actually felt like I didn't understand your personality or like really get to know you until your podcast came out. Because until that point, it was very surface level and it was kind of like very short tastes of me. So no one really ever got to experience any of like the nuances and the personality in between. And so because of the podcast, we now have that. So the kind of creation of the podcast was a blend of me not being able to film short form effectively, me wanting a place to give people more of my real, raw, unfiltered opinions, a place to connect with other individuals and connect with peers as well. And also, to be really honest, for the business goal, it was the connection of how do we get more exposure and more visibility without me necessarily having to film 30 new videos a week for TikTok? Because that, for me, just in the way that I produce, didn't seem feasible. And so it literally knocked out all of those upon launch.
Yeah, I love that story. And I can totally believe that the set was what was holding you back because that is so common. That and logos, I find, are like the two things that people are
Yeah.
coming to me. And I talked to someone yesterday. I worked with her in the past when I was doing virtual assistant work, like early on in my business. And she was like, hey, I want to start a podcast now. And I remember her telling me this like 5 years ago when we were working together the first time. And she was like, I think it's finally time. I think it's finally time to start a podcast. I was like, yeah, if you've been thinking about it for 5 years, just like bring it to life, right? And so I 100% agree with you saying that you wish you started it earlier. Even my podcast, and I'm a podcast producer, right? I wish I started this show earlier, but the best time to start is today, right? What is it
But the
saying?
craziest
Something like
part
that.
is no one cares. Like, that's
Mhm.
what's mind-boggling, is that the information and the value or the entertainment is all they care about. Like, if you think about most people, not everybody, but most people listen to a podcast while they're on a walk, while they're in the
Yep.
car, while they're on the treadmill. And so it's like they might not even be watching you. And at the end of the day, if they are watching you, like, your lights are not why they're tuning in. They're tuning in because of what you're saying and the value and like the insights and the emotion you're making them feel. And so that's why, like, again, like early episodes, I was like in a freaking blazer and now I'm in my sweatpants as we record this because I'm like, nobody cares. Like, they
Yeah.
just don't care. They want the value.
Yeah. And also, it matches your brand, right? I remember on our first sales call, I mean, you always dress nice. And your hair, I need to figure out how you do your hair because it looks amazing all the time. But even
Thanks.
on our call, when I signed on to ITI, I don't think you were wearing a blazer. And so I wouldn't expect that
Yeah.
when you are, your podcast is part of the brand. So for anyone
Yeah.
listening, just be you. Just like be authentically you and just show up however you need to show up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
So you had a really cool launch strategy too. And you did a giveaway and it was a really successful launch. You got a ton of followers on your new Instagram. Can you tell us about the launching of the Ambitious podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of took the essence or the structure of what I like about launches of like offers or anything that I do in business. And I thought, well, can we translate this to podcasts? Because I don't know about you, but I feel like sometimes people just slap a podcast in their bio. They're like, hey, I've got a new show coming out next week. Here it is. And like, go listen. And it felt lackluster. It felt like it was something that they just had as an additional arm on their business, but it was just really for people to just like, hey, go consume, and they would slap it up. And every time that I would see people release them, I was like, if I'm going to do a podcast, I'm going to like really make this like a vibe in the sense of like make it an energy, make it a momentum. And so, yeah, what we did is we went to go shoot like basically media and promotional stuff at a photo shoot for it. And we were doing obviously like the cover art. And so at that, we took some videos behind the scenes. We took some pictures. And one of the things I will say with the podcast is like, I am like aggressively ahead at all times. Like I hate the idea of like, we need an episode. Like it makes me so nervous. So I love to have things in the bank and batched. And I knew that we wanted to do that before we launched it because I was like, I don't want to start this already being behind. So we had already been filming. And so I thought, well, okay, we kind of have the ability to showcase and tease to people me at a photo shoot, tease to people that we're doing the cover art, but we didn't really tell them what it was. We just said something was coming. And then we would tease like the microphone and people are like, oh my gosh, is it a podcast? Is it YouTube? What is it? And kind of like, again, creating more eyes and getting more people latched in on the marketing. So I want to say we actually started teasing this literally like 6 months out from before it launched. And really what ultimately I think created the momentum was like all of that teasing. We made it something exciting. We made it something that people wanted to be part of. And I think one of the pieces that was also really helpful upon launch was the fact that like it wasn't the Kate Perkovic show. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but I think the reason that the launch was also successful was because it really wasn't about me. It was about when you tune into this and when you listen, here's what this means about you, and here's what it's going to give you. Here's how it's going to support you when you tune in. And so naming it Ambitious was kind of part of that. We wanted the name to also be something that when people just saw it or heard it, they could kind of get the essence of what they would perceive it was most likely covering. And so we went into launch. The giveaway strategy is actually something that I've done with a couple of clients now. And it was something that I will be totally transparent. I did not know if it was going to be effective, if it was going to work. But I had this, like, I'm a marketing person. And so I was like, I had this idea. And so what we did was we went and we took all the media of this filming shoot. And I said, the podcast covers mindset and marketing and sales and business and CEO leadership and all these things. And so I wanted clips that represented all of those. And so we made a montage and I recorded a separate voiceover for over top of this montage. And so we made a reel of it. And underneath it, we also, which was something I've been wanting to do for years, we started our coaching scholarship. So like each year we give away 6 months of coaching to somebody as just a give for our community and for our people. And so this was the first of us ever doing that. And so we're like, what a better time to launch it with Ambitious and women and entrepreneurship. Like it's a great combo. So we basically posted the giveaway for coaching, and how you entered was you shared this reel and you followed us or tagged us kind of thing, and you left a review. So it was, you have to listen to the podcast, leave a review, and share this reel. So the intention behind it was when they shared the reel to their story, it started off with, hey, I'm Kate Perkovic and I blah, 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 blah. And so if someone saw it on their story and didn't know who I was, they instantly were getting the gist of what the podcast was because of the voiceover. So it checked that box for visibility, and it checked the second one of teaching people who we were and what we were going to do. But the leaving a review piece allowed me to also have the social proof, to your point earlier, to show, what people were loving about it. And like, even for me now on every episode, I'm asking people like, reach out to me, send me your thoughts, message me your biggest takeaways, all for in the game of just really understanding, what resonates. And so we did that with the launch as well. We said like, basically share this, follow the Ambitious page and that had the clips on it, and leave a review on the show. And so we got a boatload of submissions. And we also, the biggest thing that I saw was the visibility around it was incredible. And so we really were able to get a lot of reach initially with the show. that really helped us to kind of get the initial momentum going. And I think, the first couple episodes for anybody who has a show are always really bumpy. So like, I'm not super proud of those first episodes necessarily, not my best work. But I think the launch for me was, it was exciting because it was the setting of the tone of what people could expect energetically around it. As in, like, was it inspiring? Was it empowering? And I feel like because the way we launched it, we created it to be its thing that was me as the host, but it really wasn't about me. And I think the goal with the podcast now, and even when we were launching it, was to make it something bigger than myself and to allow it from a business lens to potentially spin off to be even its own business one day if we wanted it to be. And so right now I want to say we're like, I think like 50 episodes or something like that in. Like, we're still very much a baby in the podcast world, but the launch helped a lot to really create an initial surge of like a quote unquote fan base, if you will.
Yeah. And to that point that you made of making sure that people know who you are when they were sharing that reel, that is such a good point. I'm going to ask you about some podcast pet peeves that you have later, but I'm going to share one of mine right now. And it's when you go and, someone tells you, oh, I listened to this podcast. I love it. You need to go listen. And maybe they've been listening since the launch of it, right? And then you jump in at episode, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, whatever episode you jump in at. And it's just kind of like inside jokes, no intro. Like, they forget that they are talking to new people every week, right? And so that is such a good point that you need to make sure everyone knows who you are. And even if it's their first time listening or their 50th time listening, they are still getting to know you and really feel invited to be a listener rather than tuning in and being like, who is this girl? What am I listening to?
Yeah. Well, I think like it's also remembering that like people are in consumption for themselves. So like, yes, like when we listen to people share stories on podcasts, we listen to the stories, but we really listen in the lens of like, what's our takeaway? What can we learn from it? How can we apply it to ourselves? Right. And so I think the thing, obviously I have a lot of pet peeves in consumption for sure. But I think one of the things that was a big emphasis for me was making sure that it wasn't about me. Because if it, to your point, was about me, it really made the show super selfish. And also as a result of that, really gave it a lot less ability for it to grow and expand, because it was basically indirectly, even if it wasn't named that, it would become the Kate Perkovic show instead of a place where my audience would get served. And so I think a launch is an initial opportunity for you to kind of set the stage of like, who is this for and what can they expect from you if they should decide to spend an hour a week with you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And, earlier we were talking about who you work with, but you work with some amazing, big, high-earning businesses that are making huge impact on their clients. So I'm curious because a lot of them have podcasts too that you help them kind of come up with the concept of and how it ties into their business. So I'm curious about two things. How do you make sure that the podcast stays engaging and valuable, and then also great so it stands out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely like, I'll be honest, since I met Haley, you guys, I have promoted podcasts a lot more because we talk about podcasts obviously on all of our calls together. And I know the amazing stuff that she does for her clients. And like, I think podcasts are such a unique opportunity because in what other place on the internet are you getting someone's 1 hour of undivided attention entirely focused on you? Like, think about the intimacy of that. Like, you're on a walk and you're maybe even right now listening to this in your headphones, doing whatever you're doing for the next hour. And like, you're hanging out with us. And like, that's just such an honor to be able to tap into something like that, because when you're allowed to share that space with someone and they're spending an hour with you, that's not happening on any other social media platform right now. And so when I thought about podcasts, I was like, wait a second, this is like the only place where I get to do this with people. This is amazing. And so because of that, I do recommend it to a lot of clients, and I have helped quite a few of my clientele that I work with are usually, coaches, consultants, or service-based businesses. So done for you service or agencies. We have people outside of that are like authors and things like that as well. But those are kind of the core dominant that we work with. And, a lot of them, I'm saying like, hey, you got to do a podcast. Like, you just got to do a podcast because it's such a massive opportunity for businesses and brands. And, what we found is it's really generated a lot of trust with our clients' communities. Like, they are finding that they're just, again, tapping into a level of depth with their audience that is just so different than what they've been able to do through traditional social media. So I'm definitely a huge fan of recommending it to clients. all my clients kind of approach their podcast a little differently, in the sense of like, some people are very much in it for the lens of sales. Some people are in it for the lens of like genuine, just like serving their community. Some people are in it for, brand exposure. So everyone's intention is a little bit different. But I think for us, if I'm going to be honest, to make it valuable, like to pull behind the curtain, we really do like a decent amount of research on what we're talking about and why we're talking about it. So like for us, we look at the top podcasts that our audience is listening to. So like Diary of a CEO is one of the top podcasts that all of our listeners also listen to. And so we look at, what are topics that they would connect with. Again, our demographic is 25 to 45. And so Call Her Daddy is also on the top listens of all of our audience. And so we really tap into understanding our avatar and really getting clear on who they are, where are they consuming, what topics do they like. Also, most importantly, what stage of life are they at, in the sense of what are they experiencing right now, and how can we make sure that our content and like what we're talking about is evolving with their life, but then also with their business at the same time. So we do a lot of research on topics, and we also ask our audience a lot of questions. Like I'm constantly in it with them. And so when people reach out to me on Instagram, like we often, have a lot of voice notes back and forth and message them to say like, what could we do that would help you? What would be a topic that would be supportive? We really make it audience focused, instead of like me with a Google Doc being like, what do I think is fun? Like the best person to help the show to grow is the person who's listening. And so who better to ask than them as to how I can best support them? But I think the other thing too that I would say are the other two pieces are like, I really try to make sure, kind of to my earlier point, that the storytelling is not selfish. Like I don't really want it to be how, look at my business and look at what I'm doing and look at this. Like if I feel like my business has a takeaway or a story that would be beneficial or support somebody, I'll share it. But I don't really necessarily use that as like the basis of why it's valuable. And so I think making the show not selfish and not about me has been a big reason why people want to tune in, because it serves them. And honestly, which I know is kind of like, there's two sides to this because some people don't believe in it, but I actually really believe in structuring episodes in the sense of like, have notes, have intention, have planning and preparation around what you're talking about. If it's something that's supposed to be a rant, then go ahead and rant. But I think for me, what I've found is like people say, I feel like it was really well structured. It almost felt like a little mini masterclass. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the idea, is that if you give it some structure, people are getting structured takeaways from it as well. And so for me, I think and do research about the people that I'm talking to. And I think and I prep questions about what do I want to make sure I ask. And I personally feel with the shows that I listen to, I can tell when people prepare versus when people don't. And it does impact the value that I get from it as a listener. And so I kind of took that experience and translated it to the production side of it. And for us, we have a pretty decent like prep process before we even press the button to record.
Yeah. And I love that. And I can totally tell that from your show. I think I was listening to one of your 2 episodes about your retreat to Montana. And I was on an airplane and I was listening and I was like, oh my God, this is so good. I was like writing notes and like, we work together, right? Like I'm your client, and I was still learning so much from what you were sharing on there. And so I could definitely tell it was very well planned out. And I think that honestly, solo episodes should be. When you have a guest, you can be a little more like obviously with this episode, I have like questions that I sent you, but it's more conversational. But I can always tell when a solo episode is not planned out, even if I'm recording it, because I sound like a hot mess and I'm like, who would want to listen to that? Well, I've loved everything that you've shared today. I have some rapid fire questions that I want to ask you, but before we get into those, I'd love to hear, is there anything else you want to share with the audience about podcasting or any lessons that you've learned?
Yeah, there's a lot. I'm just trying to think of like, how do I even order them? I say one of the first ones that's coming to mind is like, I think you have to be really intentional about guests that you have on your show, because I think for a couple different reasons. People often think that like guests are the way to do it because guests get them exposure. But I think sometimes like in the pursuit of exposure, people really undermine their own brand in the sense of like, you're not really being, it's kind of like if you think about, like I talk to people about this when they host events and they're like, yeah, like so-and-so's got a big audience, I'm going to bring them on. And I think, if you're somebody who cares about brand, you want to really consider like, is the person you're bringing on similar in the sense of values that you have? Are they somebody that you could see yourself wanting to be associated with long term? Like, remember, as to your point earlier, your podcast lives on. Like, this is something that you're going to be affiliated with or associated with for a decent amount of time. And so I think for me, I'm really conscious of like who I ask to come on and, who are they? Do I feel like I really support the ethics or the way that they basically have the values or principles around their business? And so I think also remembering, which has been a hard thing for me to realize, some people are not naturally structured in the way they speak. And so like there's also been episodes where I realized not everybody is designed to do podcasts in the sense of like
so true.
And you just assume when you bring somebody on that you're like, yeah, they're going to be great, and then they get on and you're like, oh my, because like you realize like they're just all over the place and all these things. And so I think it's also, which is going to maybe for some people be like, oh my gosh, but like it's actually okay to film an episode and not use it. Like it's okay to record something, and if you feel like the value isn't clear or it doesn't really hit on any kind of core points or takeaways, like I'm a big fan of, you know, really only releasing things that I think genuinely serve. And so there's been times where I've recorded a show and like, listen, I'm the first to be like, it's progress over perfection. But I also think like you want to put out valuable work and stuff that you're proud of. And so for me, I asked myself, like, if I release this, because like our episodes are, you know, say it's 1 through 50, I can't just have 47 disappear. Like once it's out, it's out. And so I asked myself, like, am I kind of confident to stand behind this entirely? And so I think one of the things I'm also really conscious of is like trying to put your best work out and realize it's going to live on. And to your point earlier, it is evergreen. So it's not like this chapters of a book that people read sequentially. Like they're going to click on a random episode and just listen to that. And so I think bringing people along the journey and realizing they're not starting from episode 1 onward, to your point, is 100% spot on. And yeah, I think my biggest learnings for the podcast in general is just like, I'm just so bummed I didn't do it earlier. Like it's one of probably my biggest, like, I learned a lot from that procrastination. So like I've decided, you know, I've processed that and dealt with that. But I think for me, it was just, it made me realize that I put aside visibility for my business for those years. I put aside the ability to connect with people for those years. I really didn't have the opportunity for people to go deep with me for those years. Like I lost so much in the pursuit of what it looked like, which to me is just devastating. And so if I could recommend to anybody, I think like it's like if you've been having that itch or that, you know, consideration or thought of starting a show, like I really would say like 3, 2, 1, go, like just do it. And, you know, even for me, I was traveling in the summer and like I obviously again was so fixated on having like a professional setup, but then I was traveling. And so I was like, I can't batch all the podcasts that I need to have for while I'm traveling. And so I literally got this like high quality webcam. And that for me made me realize that like it really, again, is just not about what it looks like. It's about getting the value. And so I was like propped up on like a nightstand with like the light from the natural window just going down as the day was progressing. And it's just, you know, for me, it was just about getting the message out. And so I think that's the other thing as well, is just like trying to not be as fixated to what it looks like or how you get it done, but just getting it done and getting it out there.
I fully agree with that. And at that point about guests is really important. And I don't think it's talked about enough. A lot of people rely very heavily on guests, but I always say like you are the only constant in your podcast. So you have to be a strong host and not rely fully on guests. Do you have tips on where you get your guests from?
I usually honestly use my network. It was interesting actually the other day. I have a list, as I said, of like research of people that are types of topics that I want to have covered. And so what I typically will do is I will make a list of all these topics and I will kind of keep them at the forefront of my mind. And so the other day I had a sales consult with a business. And she was a high performance coach, and she used to work in like the military and coach people on basically like mental strength and mental tenacity. And I've been looking for a female high performance coach specifically for like helping women to like tap into inner strength for a very long time. And here was this person, yes, not in the way that I thought they would come through, but I was like, hey, all coaching conversation aside, do you want to be on the podcast? And she was like, 100%. I was like, okay, cool. Because it was just like, there's people in your environment you're going to interact with. And I feel like I just really want to make sure that I'm always telling people like how this could help them as well. In the sense of like, yes, it's going to serve our community. So I do also think with guests, it should be mutually serving, right? So a lot of people want to go on other people's shows because it serves them. Like people who ask me to come on and they're like, okay, great. Like they want to tap into an entrepreneur audience. So I'm like, okay, I love that. But also, what do you have for them? As in like, if I'm going to allow you access to my community or my people who I really protect with value and not selling and all of those things, then what are you adding as value? And so it's been interesting because I have denied a lot of pitches to be on the podcast because people I can tell are very like, this is what I do and this is what I do. This is what I do. I'm like, yeah, but what about what you do for them? Because like they're spending their hour with you. So I also think being really conscious about intentions around guests. There's a lot of people, places to it, but I really do use my network and I usually find them in the most unconventional places. Like I will randomly be at an event and I'm like, hey, you want to be on my podcast? Like, yeah, I'm like, great. And I get them booked in. So I would say like, try to think about it less. Like obviously there's the pitching of guests and all those things. Like all those processes are very set up and people can support you with that. But I also am just always in tune thinking about who am I getting value from and how can I share that value with the people that I'm connected to, which is the audience.
Absolutely. I love that. And to that point, like whenever I get random pitches, I almost always say no. I love personalized pitches, usually through like Instagram DMs or even through email, but I can absolutely tell if it's like an AI copy paste type of thing. So definitely being a guest on podcast is very powerful, but if you are trying to be a guest, make sure that it's very aligned and you are not all about yourself. So that's a really great tip that you shared.
Yeah, I actually was going to add to that too, because I got a pitch from someone that was really well done. She emailed me and was basically like, hey, I listened to the following episodes. These are two of my favorites. Some of the big themes that I've been taking from your show recently have been A, B, C, and D. Loved your note and the quote that you mentioned in episode 3 about this. And then she was like, 3 different concepts. And here's kind of the outline of the scripts or the high level or the structure of what I thought we could talk about. And so I basically sent over like a full briefed out proposal on topics, lenses, how she thought it would support my audience, the kind of avatar that she predicts that I talk to. I opened this email and I'm like, yes, just yes. Like
I love
like
that.
The care and the consideration, to your point of the personalization of it, the care and consideration that you put into this, like no question, 100%. And then there's people who are like, hey, like, do you need another guest for your show? And I'm like, delete. Like, it's not, you're 100% spot on. The template never works.
Yeah, never. So, Kate, I have a couple questions for you, some rapid fire questions. These I'm asking to every guest. I'm having so much fun learning more about my guests through these. So whatever comes to mind, I'd love to hear it. So the first one is, what is the first podcast that you ever listened to or had the most impact on you?
Biggest impact on me for sure is the Ed Milet show. Just insane value masterclasses every single episode. I listen to Gary Vee's podcast quite a bit. I like the fact that his are real and like raw, like in the sense of the structure of them. I think I don't listen to it a lot anymore by any means, but I do think it was my first one. I'm pretty sure Joe Rogan was my first podcast that I ever listened to.
I think that's pretty common. I have strong feelings about Joe Rogan, but yeah, I mean, he has such a big audience that, of course, like so many people got their first taste. And honestly, like in the past, I have listened to his show and the production value, everything is great. Do I believe in what he believes in? No, but that's okay. We have more podcasts out there now.
Oh, the other one I would say is really good, which I find just like for comedic relief, is Theo Vaughn's podcast.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, really funny.
Funny. Yeah. Okay, I love that. So besides your own podcast genre of business, what is your favorite podcast genre?
Okay, so this is going to sound really weird, but I found it through TikTok. So I obviously like personal development and business, like I'm right into it. So like that's my usual category. The other category that I did find was there's people who cover like true crime stories. Yeah. There's a girl, I think her thing is Coffee and Crime, and it's literally a matter of like she's like pull up a coffee basically and like hang out for half an hour, and she tells these stories of like mysteries of people who went missing and all of these things. It sounds so weird now that I'm saying it out. Like, it's so odd. But I'm like, you know what? People have podcasts about dogs. I can listen to mystery podcasts, and that's okay.
No, I love that. I love true crime podcasts. And I like ones that have already been solved. I don't like open cases. I like the ones that there is an ending to the story.
Yeah, totally. 100%.
Do you have any dream podcast guests?
Ooh. I mean, if I'm going to be honest, I feel like having Gary Vee would be huge for me. His podcast when I was first starting my business was like every single morning I would listen to it for an hour. because he just has so much content out. He doesn't do like a weekly episode. He does like 5 a week or something crazy because they're not like super curated. But I think that would be huge for me because, yeah, like when I was first starting as a business owner, again, I didn't really know anything about business. And so I kind of went to like, you know, school of hard knocks and just went through it on my own. It was very much kind of like a self-learner. And so because of that, his stuff isn't necessarily heavy on strategy, but it is heavy on mindset. And so I think because of that, it got me through so many things. And, you know, even in thinking about it, I think, you know, having him on would be huge. But I think mainly to be able to kind of like have this like full circle moment in a way. I saw him on stage recently at an event and like, I wouldn't say I'm a type to fangirl. I'm not like, I didn't think it was in my wiring, but turns out it is. Because yeah, like when you have somebody who's just such a big part of your journey, it's a huge thing to like be able to kind of like have that full circle. But I feel like for me, my other dream outside of that would be people who listen. Like I would love to be able to connect with people who actually listen to the show, like face to face. Cause like the thing that I feel like unless people reach out to you, you don't know who's listening. And so for me, sometimes, I don't know if you feel like this, but it kind of feels like you're talking into the ether, like you're talking into a hallway. Like you're like, is anybody there? Like, you know? And so when you're doing solo shows, at least. And so I feel like for me, the other thing that would be really, really super cool, which I've considered, is kind of like turning portions of the show into like a call-in show where you can actually have like, you know, segments of time kind of thing where you take questions and you have people call in. That's always been like a dream of mine. Logistically, tech-wise, as I said earlier, I'm not inclined that way. So like that would be a mission and a half, but that would be like my second dream if I could have another ideal segment.
I love that. I'm having someone on this podcast, Alicia. She's the host of Here for a Good Time podcast, and she does that kind of she actually brings like a phone to the events that she hosts, and people can like pick it up and leave her a message and then like hang up the phone, and it's like this cute red, I don't know, like old style phone, and then she plays them in the podcast, and it's like
so cool,
really cute. But also with Gary Vee, like his podcast had such an impact on you, and now your podcast gets to have that same impact on other people. So
yeah,
just it's kind of like a full circle moment right there. I love that. Cool. What is one podcast you recommend everyone listen to? Is it Gary Vee's podcast?
I actually would say, I think I'd actually probably have to say Ed Milet's podcast, because I think his is a very well-rounded podcast in the sense of business topics versus personal and personal development. And one of the things I actually really admire about the way that he does podcasting is like he's the first to throw himself on the stake. Like, it's not like I'm up here and I know everything and I'm teaching you. And, you know, he really does use it in a way as a diary. And, you know, if someone is on the show and talking about, you know, lack of consistency, he will admit and totally surrender to like, yep, I lack consistency all the time. It's something I constantly struggle with. And I really admire that because I find that, you know, when I feel like I'm listening to someone openly share and be vulnerable, I feel like I want to connect to it more because I feel seen when I'm listening to it. And I don't feel like I'm being talked down to, but more like I'm just kind of like in a mutual open circle with. And so, yeah, I would definitely say the Ed Milet show. Like he has so many episodes and just the way he structures them, very well researched, very open, very transparent and vulnerable. It's just a lot of pieces that I think really allow it to be super successful.
Awesome. I love that. Okay, next question I have for you. What is your biggest pet peeve as a podcast listener? Do you have any?
I do. I'm trying to think. Do I get one? Do I get
You can
multiple?
have as many as you want.
I'm like, here's the 27 things I do.
I know. I think literally every episode I share a new one that I have. So I'm like, oh gosh.
Okay. I feel like when people are not prepared. And okay, so here's the thing. When you have, you know, like gossip podcasts, they're meant to be non-structured and they're kind of like, you know, just quick opinions and back and forth. That's fine because it's built into why you're listening. You're listening for the real, raw, authentic conversation of just like whatever comes up. I feel like if you're listening for information and someone's just kind of like, yeah, and so, and yeah, and like it just really doesn't have any structure, you've lost me because it just means that like the hour I took where I really wanted to get something from it, I feel like we're just circling the drain. So I think lack of preparation for sure. But if I'm going to be really honest, I think the podcast that I don't know, it's a very polarizing thing to say, but as a business coach, the podcast that people have that you and I both know, you're only doing it for sales. Like it's so blatantly obvious that the only reason you're recording, your energy is crap. You don't care about the audience. You're not interacting with people. People are commenting on your clips on YouTube, Instagram, whatever, and like none of them are liked, commented to, answered, whatever. The topics all somehow conveniently seem to be around you and your results or like your wins and how amazing you are. And every story just circles back to like, yeah, and so like learn from me and hire me and work with me. And I'm like, ew, dude, like just go and actually serving somebody, I think is the intention of a podcast. And so like when it comes to selling, I get all businesses have to sell. But I also am a firm belief that like if someone wants to find you by listening to your podcast for an hour every week, they know where to find you. So like if you're adding value, they'll reach out to you, come find you and say, hey, loved what you talked about on XYZ this week. Would love to see what it's like to work together. Is that an option? Like where can I find more info? So I think like strategic show notes will allow you to do that. If you want to do an ad break or something, you can do that. But I just feel like people having podcasts strictly to just basically be a sales pitch every single show is so upsetting to me because it just seems so selfish. So when I've kind of said that like 8 times today, obviously you can see it's my ick around podcasts. I've had to give, people are like, what do you think of my show? I'm like, if I'm gonna be honest, it seems extremely self-serving. Like it really, like if I'm a listener, I didn't get a lot out of it because it really didn't, it wasn't there for me. It was there for you and to like boost yourself. That is by far my biggest ick. And so I think, again, if you're the host, you can tell your story, but should always be in the lens of how can someone else get value from what I'm about to share rather than just telling them so they know how great you are.
Oh, I 1000% agree with you. That is absolutely one of mine too, because yeah, people can tell. And even some podcasts don't start off that way, but then they start making sales and then end up like ad after ad. And then the ad ends, but then they're talking about their services. And you're like, oh my God, there's a podcast that I used to love that recently did that. And I'm like, I can't listen anymore. I've like lost interest in, what she's talking about. And so, but, you don't do that and you still make sales from your podcast. I forgot to ask you about that earlier. Can you tell us like
Yeah.
the results that you've seen from your show so far?
Bananas because the number one thing that everyone is taught in business is like you need a bajillion followers or you need a ton of subscribers to be able to make sales. And like, listen, I have clients who have, say 30,000, 40,000 monthly listeners on their show and are struggling to sell something at all. And I've also got people who have a fraction of that. Let's call it maybe, I don't know, 5,000 a month. And they're seeing consistent sales from it. So like one of the biggest things that's been really eye-opening with the podcast, it kind of goes back again to like depth, not width. And so I think, being audience centric, being really tuned into the type of topics you're talking about, really going in to seek to serve at a deep level. When we launched our podcast, I'd have to get the girls to pull up the data, but it was like literally just within launch, just around launch, we did $150,000, I think it was, or $200,000 in just like, I want to say less than 6 episodes. And one of the elements that's actually been really interesting around that was there's kind of this term coined scripture statements. And I learned this from my coach, George Bryant. It's basically a brand trigger. And so brand triggers are like statements that you put into a podcast that allow people to really easily recall the information that you shared. And so, in one of the episodes that I was sharing, I was talking about how to really know that you've got a resistance in your business and how to navigate it. And, one of the mottos I always tell the clients is like, if it's a pattern, it's a problem, is kind of one of the quotes that I always say. And so really what ended up happening was when I learned about scripture statements and brand statements, I started to actually plant those in the podcast. And so when I planted them in the podcast, I literally was getting on sales calls with people and they'd be like, yeah, like I was listening to your show and you remember you have this one line and it was like, if it's a pattern, it's a problem. And that's what made me realize like I do have a lot of patterns. So I really just was like, I need to get help. And I had someone else who, was saying, it's all data, no drama kind of thing. And they had that term. And there's kind of like just these domino of all these terms that were from the show. And I would say a decent amount of our leads now come from either people who were listening to the show, then went to Instagram, or have been listening to just like the first episode onward kind of thing. And a lot of leads we're having come in are finding that they've been listening to the episodes over and over and over, or even like my clients are like, hey, I listened to your episode this week and I listened to this, and it really, made me think about XYZ. Like it really has just been an incredible sales tool for us to help people to understand our methodologies or our perspectives or approaches, and then use that as an invitation. But to your point, like we have like a very hard rule. Like we don't pitch. Like there's no ads, there's no like, hey, and by the way, like if you want to work with us, like I think maybe in the entirety of all the episodes, I've maybe said that twice because people have asked, like, how do we reach out to you? But the sales have been significant. Like I'm talking, to be honest, like less than 6 episodes, we were signing clients of $60,000 who were just listening to the podcast. And I have never seen their face before. They were just podcast listeners who had just consumed us there. So with the right content, and also, which is why I'm such a massive fan of what you do. Like I don't edit my own show. I have an incredible team of girls behind the scenes who chop up clips and disperse them and write captions and all the things, literally, Haley, that you do. Like we have somebody behind the scenes who does. And I actually am a firm believer that everybody does need that, because for me, I think the reason I'm able to make the sales is because I have somebody who is a specialist doing those things. Because if it was me, those clips would not be the way they are. And if it was me, that editing would not be as good as it is. And so I also can't take entire credit for it because I have, a team who helps me to produce a lot of what we do. But with that team effort, like it's very ROI positive. And as I said, it's still a baby. Like it's not even, I have peers who have 600 episodes. So the fact that we're like under 100 episodes, to me, I'm like, we're just getting started. So I definitely think the more value, the more likely you are to have the sales opportunities you're looking for.
Well, congrats on that. That is truly amazing. It is such,
Thanks.
like, if that's not inspiring to people, I don't know what will inspire them to start their podcast. But
Yeah,
then 6
do it now.
Right,
Do it
now. Because, people before they, especially with like a high ticket offer, you're going to want to know more about who you're going to be coached by. And so Instagram, TikTok, that can only take you so far. Really, as you were talking about earlier, that long form content, that is really where the trust is built. So thank you so much for sharing that, and congrats on your like massive success of this podcast so far.
Thanks.
Yeah, I have one last question for you, and then we will wrap up. What is the most surprising thing that you've learned about yourself through podcasting?
Sometimes the first thing that comes to mind is sometimes I feel like I'm shocked by what I say. Like, and what I mean by that is like in the first couple episodes was very reserved. Like I wasn't comfortable. Like I was very like, what am I going to say? Make sure I fill the space. Like, is this valuable? Is it structured? Am I asking good questions? Am I reflecting back well? And what I've realized is like the more kind of real and raw, and I hate this word because it gets used so many times, but it's true, authentic, that you can be with your show, the more people feel comfortable and connected to you listening to it. And so I think, one of the things that I've learned is like when you start to get comfortable, you kind of open yourself up. Like you just really become this open book, either in the business of what you do or if you have a personal share on your podcast. And I really was a firm believer before starting that I needed to have a big audience in order to have like quote unquote fans or like listeners who were like, number one fans. And, as we record this, the Spotify Wrapped just came out. And when we started to see how many people had us in their top 5, I could not believe that given how long we've been out. And so for me, the aspect of like how quickly you can connect with people, even with having a very short amount of episodes out, was genuinely mind-boggling to me, because I thought we'd have to have like, I don't know, 50,000 downloads or something crazy for that to happen, and to like actually have like a connected group of people. But seeing how many people are constantly listening and how many downloads we've had in a short amount of time, for me was like just so surprising of like the impact of what connection can do. And so I think I'm surprised by how much I share that I never could foresee that I ever would have shared on a podcast or in social media in general. And then on the other side, I'm very surprised by how quick you can build community with a podcast versus social media. Because I felt like with Instagram, and I've been on Instagram for years, it felt like it was a slow burn. Like it felt like it was hard to build community. But again, I think back to, having someone listening to you for an hour every week, and then also having, topics that are centered in value and all these pieces, you build community way quicker than you think. And it was shocking to me on how quick all of that can happen and transpire. And so it's also been shocking, but also very exciting as to, like, the potential of what it can do. So yeah, I would say those are definitely my top two.
I love that. Oh my gosh, Kate, this has been so much fun. What's next for you and the podcast?
So, good question. As I said earlier, my dream is definitely to do a call-in show. So I have that on the top of my mind. I had a crazy year personally this year, but I have always desired to do events around it. So we did do a ambitious event actually before the podcast launched, and it was all around basically saying the values around ambitious and doing dinner series, which would be like the one that we had was in New York. And so what we really want to do is we want to do pop-up events that are basically for people who are listeners, to just allow like business owners, ambitious women in any bucket really to be able to connect and kind of come together. And so, yeah, my goal definitely obviously is to just go completely hard when it comes to how many episodes I'm putting out. I would love to double down on episodes. My team's probably like, oh my God, no. But I would love to double down on episodes. But I think my ultimate dream would be definitely to create it as its own community, to have, potentially an associated community of people who listen to it somewhere else, like a Substack or like a membership or something like that, that's free for people to connect. And then also something probably around, in-person events and connections that way as well. But yeah, I really just, the big dream for me is to build it to be bigger than me and really something outside of myself.
I love that. I can't wait for you to bring that to life. Oh my gosh. Well, Kate, this has been so much fun. I'll put the link to your Instagram and your website and of course your podcast in the show notes. And so anyone who wants to go connect with Kate, listen to her show, or even work with her, she's an incredible coach. So if you're a female looking to scale your business, definitely I would recommend Kate and all of her coaching.
Thanks.
Yeah, well,
today was fun. It was really, really good.
It was. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me in the Podcast Cafe. I hope you're leaving with fresh ideas and inspiration to take your podcast to the next level. Remember, podcasting is a journey and you don't have to do it alone. I'm here to help you every step of the way. Let's connect. Be sure you follow me on Instagram at Espresso Podcast Production or visit espressopodcastproduction.com for more tips, resources, and behind the scenes insights. I'd love to hear about your podcasting journey. If you've enjoyed today's episode, make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling extra generous, I'd love it if you could leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps more podcasters just like you find the show. Until next time, grab your coffee, keep creating, and I'll see you back here in the Podcast Cafe.